Welcome back, everyone, to the Get Healthy America show. So, Doctor, before the break, we were talking about this roundtable that occurred in Washington, D.C., and you've been talking a lot about the impact of food and the soil and how it impacts your gut. Now, I wanted to talk to you and have you talk a little bit about how that intersection between the gut and the brain, I guess they call it the gut-brain axis. Can you talk a little bit what that is?
Yes, and actually during the break, I was contemplating this. We have a mental health crisis in our country. We all know this to be true in children and adults and the elderly. It's happening, and I wonder how much of that crisis is tied to what we're talking about today. The quality of the food we're eating and foods that are grown in soil that has been stripped of its natural microbiome, and how that's impacting our own gut microbiome and how that is impacting mental health in our country. And so that it remains to, stay tuned. But I wonder how much of a role the microbiome in its totality is actually having on mental health in our country. And so scientific research, it now shows that soil and gut microbiomes are intricately connected, and they both influence brain health. In terms of the soil and gut science, we know a single pinch of soil contains hundreds of microbial species essential for nutrient cycling and plant resilience. And regenerative practices boost microbial diversity, leading to nutrient-dense crops. And those nutrient-dense crops feed our microbiome. So there's this such a close connection between what's happening with our soil and what's happening with us. We are part of nature. And it's time to really make that connection and appreciate how important the foods we eat and how they're grown and how well we do or do not care for our soil impacts our own mental health and our brain health.
What about, so talk a little bit physiologically about, these things such as fatty acids, GABA.
Yeah.
What are those things? What is that?
Yeah, so getting to this gut-brain axis, the gut microbiome produces neurotransmitters. The one of the most popular ones that we know of is serotonin. 90% of serotonin is made in the gut. Serotonin is that feel-good hormone that a lot of people take, an antidepressant to keep boosted levels in our brain, but we're missing out on 90% of where that serotonin is manufactured, right? And so the gut produces serotonin. It also produces something called GABA. GABA is a calming neurotransmitter. So GABA is what helps you to stay calm and is actually used to treat anxiety. So low GABA levels equals anxiety. So we've got serotonin manufactured in the gut and GABA manufactured in the gut. Serotonin most closely tied to depression and GABA most closely tied with anxiety. And those are two major issues when we talk about the mental health crisis in our country.
So, can I ask you this question? If the gut microbiome is distorted, does that impact our ability to produce things like serotonin and GABA and things like that?
Yeah, well, yes. Yeah, if our gut microbiome is off, there's something called short chain fatty acids that help to strengthen the gut lining and reduce inflammation and support cognitive function. If we have what's called dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of the good bacteria and the bad bacteria, that's not happening as efficiently and as effectively as it should. And so it reduces our serotonin levels, it reduces our GABA levels. So an imbalance in the gut microbiome very definitely is a cause for depression and anxiety, if not the most important cause. Again, that's where I'm contemplating how much of a role is the quality of our soil and the quality of our soil microbiome and the quality of our gut microbiome playing in this whole mental health crisis in our country. We see kids being raised on sugar. I mean, it's really it's terrible, and it's just so common. I mean, I see it. I have a 13-year-old daughter. I see it with her friends, etc. It's just normal to be eating Sour Patch Kids every day, right? And that's not normal. It's not normal. When you're doing that, you are compromising the gut microbiome, which will lead to things like depression and anxiety. And so those simple sugars, those refined sugars, let alone the neurotoxins from the artificial colors and flavors, etc. But those refined sugars are feeding the bad bacteria and the bad fungi in our gut and causing that imbalance. And then you have kids that are given antibiotics for chronic ear infections, which are can typically oftentimes be tied to a food allergy, for example. But instead, they're given the antibiotics, and there is a place for those antibiotics when you have a severe issue going on. I'm not saying that, but oftentimes there can be an underlying food allergy, and but these kids are getting these antibiotics, which is further stripping their body of the good bacteria, their microbiomes of the good bacteria. So you're just setting them up for depression and anxiety, especially as they hit those teenage years and they're dealing with hormone fluctuations on top of that, right? And so we really do need to get back to the basics of quality nutrition, quality food, having more of paying more close attention to that gut microbiome. And again, there are functional medicine doctors, there are naturopathic physicians, and this is what we're trained in this. This is like we live this, breathe this, where you can go seek them out and get tested to see what's going on with your gut microbiome and what
Well,
you can do specifically to help balance things out again.
well, let me ask you about that specifically. If someone came into your office and said, I'm having these issues, I have the issues that you talked about, what would you look at? And then what would a protocol look like that you would put together?
Well, just like I said, I would test them. I would look at their gut microbiome, and there's different ways to do that. I use everything from blood to urine to stool testing to see what's going on there. And then based on that, treat accordingly, right? So there could be specific probiotics that I recommend. There will definitely be a shift in diet, focusing on locally grown produce that is grown on a regenerative agriculture farm, especially if there's a major gut dysbiosis going on. I will really push for that, on top of taking good bacteria, that are healthy and giving prebiotics and so forth, while focusing more on natural compounds that help to lower the bad bacteria in your gut.
Like what types?
In terms of supplementation,
Yeah.
so yeah, so I'm a big fan of glutathione. I'm also a big fan of glycine, which helps to, and glutamine, which helps to feed the intestinal enterocytes. Remember, I was talking about those cells that line your gut. Well, they feed on things like glutamine, and so, and I test in my practice to see what your glutamine levels are. But that's a very simple fix. But things like glutathione and glycine boosts GABA levels. One of the ways it does that is by helping to rebalance the gut microbiome. Same with glutathione, right? So glutathione lowers that whole inflammatory load and again helps with balancing that gut microbiome.
And so, how, like, you would look after testing, you would talk to them, and then you would come up with some sort of a protocol. How often would you see the patient, or would you talk to them? What would that look like?
Oh, it depends on the case. It really, it's such I believe in individualized medicine where everybody is different. And so it depends on what's going on in terms of testing and length of time and when we would do follow-up visits. So it really is, it's on a case by case basis.
And how about what do you think of like an anti-inflammatory diet? What would that look like?
An anti-inflammatory diet for
Yeah. Is,
supporting the gut
yeah,
microbiome.
yeah. Would you recommend that or no? Or
Yeah, I always recommend an anti-inflammatory diet. So there's something called the 21-day purification program that I designed over 20 years ago. And I still prescribe that same diet today. It's a purification diet. And it is basically a diet that lowers the inflammatory load on the body. And it's very important what you're eating, but it's equally important what you're not eating. So when you're on an anti-inflammatory type diet, you're not consuming refined sugars, you're not consuming alcohol, you're limiting the intake of red meats, but you can still consume it. You're avoiding ultra-processed foods altogether. So there's no ultra-processed foods on that diet. But boy, do you notice a difference in a short amount of time. When my patients start to follow the purification diet that I designed, it doesn't take long for them to realize. And really, it's about helping people make the connection. What I'm eating is really making an impact on my mood, my well-being, my energy levels, and my ability to, if they're athletes, on their ability to perform and then recover quicker. If they're CEOs, their ability to make clear decisions and manage stress in a healthier way, and stay balanced mentally and emotionally. And so, yeah.
So we have about 30 seconds left, Doctor, before the end of this segment. Can you give everyone the phone numbers? 3 seconds.
Yes, 866-870-KR LA, 866-870-5752.